Hey, my students, I miss y'all this semester. Is everybody doing well?
Yes, we miss you, Miss Dr. Stedman.
Yeah, I missed all of you. Had to join in and just check on you tonight. So everything going well?
I passed my praxis today.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
congratulations.
congratulations. That's great.
Glad to get that done.
Okay. Y'all keep me in tune with what's going on, and I hope I get to see. I hope most of you will end up going to Gardner Webb in December and picking up your certificate, and hope I can see most of you then. Meet most of you face to face. I'd love to.
Do you know the date for that yet?
Rosalind, Dr. Lamb will have to tell you that. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Well, hold just a second. I think I do have it on my calendar. I marked it down. It's always close to it. I think it's December the 14th. I think, but there may be some changes to that a little bit. I don't know. Dr. Lamb, I talked more about that, but it's around. It's that weekend anyway.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Stedman, I have on my calendar the 14th as well.
Okay. But the reason I said that, Dr. Lamb mentioned something that may be a little bit differently, so I don't know how that's going to. I mean, it'll be a good thing, but I just don't know how it's going to play into that particular day. So he'll be more. He'll tell you more about that when he knows for sure.
I noticed a hat. Is that Dr. Stedman?
That's me. Who is this?
It's Claudia Jenkins. How are
Hey,
you?
Claudia, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm proud to say my peanuts are looking pretty good. We scouted.
That's great. How's the family situation going?
We start chemo this week, so
Yeah.
we are trying to. Mom's better, Dad's not doing great, but we're making it.
We'll continue to keep that in our prayers. I know exactly where you are. Went through the same thing with my mom, so I do understand what you're dealing with right now.
Well, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate it. It's been they discovered it was a rare kind of cancer that affects mostly Asian men, and my dad is like 6'5" and
wow,
big bulky white man. So it's a tough road, but we're gonna make it with God's step and faith. We got it.
That's well. I will continue. And it's great to hear from you.
You too. All right, I'm gonna mute myself so y'all can take it over.
Okay.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Oh, man, let me stop my share. See who we got with us tonight. Welcome. I see Dr. Stone's with us and Dr. Stedman. We've got a lot of folks. I appreciate you being with us tonight. I'll just dive right in. This is the MELS 605 interviewing town hall. We do this every year or every semester that we have 605s. The purpose of tonight is to get you ready to start interviewing for administrative openings. Now, as you've heard me say before, nobody gets the battlefield promotion. Everybody's going to have to be an AP first. And so, as in anything in life, if you're prepared and planned and prepared, you have a lot better chance of success. And so I'll go ahead and start tonight with the 4 types of assistant principal interviews. There are 4 separate and distinct types of interviews. Before you go to one, you should know which type you're walking into. Now, hopefully you'll be prepared for any of the 4, but most specifically, you need to spend your time preparing for the kind of interview that you're going to have. Now, in some of the larger districts, you may have all 4 of these. And some of the smaller districts, you may not have but 1 of these or 2 of these. But we're going to go through all 4 of them. So let me grab my books. And I said, let me grab my books for a reason. These are copyrighted materials from Gallup. I cannot share them with you, but I can tell you about them. The first type of interview that you may have, especially if you're interviewing for an applicant pool in a large district, is what we call a strength finder. That's why we have that book in 605, the Gallup book, Rath and Conchi. They're looking for certain dispositional strengths, certain traits and characteristics that we know that the best principals have. And it may be a phone interview, it may be online, or it may be face-to-face. But they're going to ask you questions about your dispositional strengths and weaknesses. And so let me kind of clue you in as to kind of the questions that you may have for an interview of this sort. They're going to ask you questions like, do you have a life commitment to education? They're trying to determine certain themes. Those themes are commitment, ego drive, achiever, developer, individualized perception, relator, stimulator, team, arranger, command, discipline, and concept. All these aligned with those strengths that you find in Strength Finder, the 2.0 text. These are the things that they're looking for in you. They'll ask you things like, should a principal treat all teachers the same? And the answer is no, of course. You treat them as individuals. Do you like to run meetings? Are you a highly disciplined person? Do you have more energy than others? They'll ask you things like that, and they won't just say, well, this is commitment. They will mix these in for you. Now, that's the good news. If they give you the formal interview, it comes in 5 rounds of 12 questions. However, you need to score about 44 out of 60 to progress into the applicant pool. Here's the bad news. Each of those rounds of 12 has 1 landmine question. If you answer it wrong, you'll continue through that section, but they'll end the interview at the end of that section. So you've got to be careful of those landmine questions. And so let me kind of clue you into what the landmine questions are. From the first section, the question is are you a disciplined person? And the answer, of course, is yes. No equivocation. You are a highly disciplined person. That is a major tenet of school leadership is that you have to show up on time and you have to do the things that you need to do, not the things that you want to do. You're on time, you're planned, prepared. You are a highly disciplined person. School business runs on a time basis, being there every day. And so if you say, well, you know, I try to be, but I'm not really, or I'm working on it, that's not an acceptable answer. So that's kind of the landmine question from the first section. The second section, the landmine question is, here it is. Do you want your teachers to know that they can call you anytime, day or night? The answer, of course, is yes. They're looking for people who have a commitment, not just an 8-to-5 job, that you are totally invested, you are totally committed, that you are the assistant principal or the principal 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, They want to know that if there's something that comes up that you won't say, well, I'll handle it next week, or don't take calls over the weekends and those kinds of things. They want to know that you have a commitment, and that that you will be there, you will be available if needed. That's very important. Do you like contests? Everybody understands that accountability is a competitive environment, that schools and test scores, it's all about achievement, it's about competition. If you don't like contests, then you're not going to be competitive enough to be a school administrator. So that's the answer, the landmine question there, and that one. Or do you have beliefs that you're never going to change? And the answer is yes. You have a firm commitment to education. You believe every child can learn, and that you're not ever going to change that belief. They're looking for a commitment. They're looking for a commitment. Okay. Now this is one that a lot of folks debate me on. They don't really get it, but hopefully you folks will. So if you're asked, this is one of the questions that you get asked most every interview situation is, if it paid exactly the same, being an administrator or being a teacher, if it paid exactly the same, which would you prefer? And of course, the correct answer is administrator. You are interviewing to change careers, not just jobs or positions. You're interviewing to change careers. Teachers work with students. Administrators work with adults. That's what they hire you for. You don't teach them. You work with adults. And so the answer is, if it paid exactly the same, I want to work with adults. I want to be an administrator. I want to work with adults. That's the only answer that's acceptable there. And then the last one, and this one sounds overtly simple, but I've had people tell me, when I've asked, are you an on-time person? They say, well, I'm not really a morning person. The correct answer is, I'm always on time or early. As I said earlier, we run schools on the basis of time. The bell rings the same time every day. You've got to be there. You've got to be where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be, because you're setting the example for the teachers that they've got to be where they are, where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be. So, are you an on-time person? Yes. I'm always early. That is the appropriate answer. Yes, I'm a morning person. Even if you aren't, yes, I'm a morning person. I was principal at Early Start High School. I had a person came in, interviewed for assistant principal, said, I'm not really a morning person, but why are you here? We start every morning at 6:10. Buses start coming in at 6:20. We start breakfast at that time. Breakfast is over at 6:50. We're in class starting by 7 o'clock. Tardy bell rings at 7 every morning. If you're not a morning person, you're not going to, you're not going to be, you're not an appropriate person for us. But everybody wants to know that you're on time, that you show up every morning sober and clean clothes, and you're ready to roll. And that's important. So those are the dispositional kinds of things that they're trying to find out about you, about your work ethic, your job maturity. That's what they're looking for in that type of interview. And that's usually something that it has to do with Gallup or Strength Finder 2.0. Another one of the applicant pool type interviews that they do are the in-basket activity. That's a reasoning activity. Let me see. Where they give you scenarios and you're supposed to know law and finance and rules. This is my favorite one because it kind of calls you out if you over your ego. So congratulations on your new job. Let's see. This is from a reporter of a local paper who wants to come to your school. and do a newspaper feature on you. This is number 2. The newspaper would like to do a feature on you as a new principal, and I need to set up a time for interviewing you and some of your teachers and students. Please respond as soon as you receive this email and let me know a good time to come. Thank you, Tom Roberts from Educational News. What should your response to Mr. Roberts be? Anybody have a clue as how you would respond to that request from a reporter to come to your school and interview you, teachers, and students on your campus? Anybody have any notion of what your response should be to that email?
Contact district office.
That's exactly right. You forward it and say, this has been forwarded to the Public Information Office. You're supposed to know you never speak to the press, ever. Everything that you say has to be vetted and come through the Public Information Office. We don't allow news media on our campuses. You notice when something happens at a school, they're interviewing parents sitting in their cars. That's because they're across the street. They're not allowed onto the school campus. We would never allow a reporter to stick a camera in a student's face. What would happen to us if that happened and that kid appeared on TV? Would they do anything to the news media? No. What would they do to you? They'd fire you because you violated that kid's privacy, FERPA rights. You can't let kids appear on videos. Can't be interviewed by media. We never give any statements, just like when you had me for 603. Or if you had somebody else. When the scenario where activity bus or the school bus had a wreck, we don't speak to the media. Even if they show up on the scene of an accident, you direct them to the Public Information Office. We never speak to the media. That's one of those reasoning activities where it kind of hits on your ego, and you forget things like that. And so the reasoning activity is some law, some policy, some common sense kinds of things. Request to do a study in your building. Nope, that's got to go through your research and R&D department. We don't allow people to come in and collect data for dissertations. Lesson plans for substitutes. They're supposed to, oh, I love this one. Your custodian wants to cut the water off whilst kids are in the building. Oh, no. No. They'll have to come back at another time. The health department would get fined out of existence for cutting the water off of kids and not having any bathrooms where kids are in the building. Just things like that. Letting the teacher leave early all the time. That speaks to flex time and comp time. In non-union states like North and South Carolina, there is no such thing as flex time or comp time. You get one of those questions, and that's what this one is about, leaving early, and I'll work some other time. That's a comp time question. There is no such thing as comp time. That is not allowable. You should have learned that with me in 603. There is no comp time. You have to work the hours as listed. Those kinds of things. Now, if they give you this actual or set of questions for this in-basket activity and you do the full activity, they will ask you at the end, what are you going to do about each of these scenarios? But they also may ask you to do this. To go back and look at all of the scenarios they gave you and categorize them in terms of urgent or important. So you've got to take each one of the 21 and categorize them as either urgent and important, urgent, not urgent but important, urgent but not important, and not urgent and not important. I'm going to let you look at the screen there a minute and look at those. Now, if they give you this exercise to do with the scenarios that they give you, they're not going to look to see how many you got. They're looking for one quadrant. They're looking at quadrant number 3. If you have any of the scenarios in quadrant number 3, you fail this part of the interview process. There's no such thing as something that's urgent, but it's not important. That's an oxymoron. Again, that's a reasoning activity. So they may give you something like this with scenarios, and they'll all be about law and finance and policy and public information and privacy rights, things that you know, but then they may ask you to categorize them. Please remember, there's no such thing as an issue that's urgent but not important. It can't be urgent if it's not important. So just remember that if they give you these. But a lot of times they will give you these reasoning activities to work through. They're mostly based on law and finance. Like you got to turn the money in every day. Teachers can't keep money in their classroom. They'll ask you questions. You can't speak to the media. You can't let teachers, there's no such thing as comp time. You can't let teachers come in late or leave early. Those kinds of things. Things that you know and learned from our activities in 603. That's generally what you get in these. Would somebody really fall for that? It's incredible how many, good question, Emily. It's incredible how many people do fall for that. They think something is urgent, but it's not important. Hopefully none of our folks would. But this one is basically law and finance. The first one was about your dispositional behaviors. It's not really about what you've learned in the program, but what kind of person you are. If you give you an in-basket activity like this, it's all about what you learned in the program in terms of the law and finance piece. And then the third type of the initial interview is one where they give you data and they have you do a mini app sell. That's the third kind. Now, I know you can do that because that's the first thing we teach you in the program, is when you look at your data and you figure out your most pressing need, and then you do a quick literature review to find, say, for example, your issue is reading fluency. You do a quick literature review on reading fluency because that's your most pressing need, and then you find that the answer everybody's given is phonics, and you do a quick and dirty annotated bibliography on phonics, that kind of thing. They'll give you a data set and have you pick out most pressing need. Now, please remember, on most pressing need, you don't have to know a lot about the school. They may give you a little bit of demographic information about the school, but make sure that it's gap times number. Let me say that again. When you're calculating most pressing need, make sure you look at gap times number. Now, what that means, and everybody knows, is what is that subgroup's gap? What's the gap between them and your overall school scores, or that group and a comparable group in the district or in the state? And what's the number of people in that group, that subgroup? Your most pressing need is not going to be 3 students. It's going to be a larger group than that. And sometimes that's the trick. They'll have one they'll have several and their gap is about 10 points, but they'll have one that's 20. Oh, that's the one. That's my most pressing need, but there's 2 students in that subgroup. And there's one over here with a 15 that's got 100 students in it. That's your most pressing need. So remember, if they have you do a data analysis project, it's gap times number to find your most pressing need. Don't forget to factor in how many students are in that group. That's always kind of the catch on one of those. And so, yeah, Rosalind, I know, but that's that's a really bad habit to get into. So that's the next of the type of opening activities. Now, a lot of districts have now gone to the first level for applicant pool is a virtual interview. I've got a synopsis of how that generally works. Here's some of the questions. When they do a virtual interview, they want you to look at the screen like I'm looking right now. Now, if you feel like you might need notes, or sometimes they'll combine this with a data analysis or some other project. If you feel like you need notes, don't look down and read your notes. Trick is put your notes on little stickies and put them around the border of your laptop or your screen so that you look like you're looking at the screen when you're checking your notes. If you look away from the screen very much, you'll fail your virtual interview. I had a student recently that just could not figure out why she did not pass her virtual interview. And of course, when we got to looking at it, she just basically sat and read her notes. They're not listening to what you say, they're watching what you do. And so they'll ask you some general questions. What are your thoughts on English as second language learners? I mean, they'll ask you some general softball type questions, but they're looking for your countenance. Can you communicate and collaborate virtually? That's a big part of school nowadays. Can you talk into the camera, or do you freeze when you get on there? You know, they don't give you a lot of time. They're not really so much concerned about the answer or the content of your question is your presence, that you're speaking to them and that you're comfortable, and that when the light of your camera comes on, you don't freeze. Because people who tend to do that tend to freeze when they get in front of groups of people. It's kind of their way to know, can you stand up and command a room of people? Can you speak to people? It's actually, some people find it harder to speak into the camera or the computer than a group of people, and vice versa. But it's generally a pretty good indicator. If you can't look into the camera on the virtual interview, if you're not comfortable conversing like you're sitting in the room with a person, generally you can't do that when you're put in front of a group of people. And what they're trying to figure out is do you have the presence to be able to pull off the job? It's just that simple. You know, I'm the world's worst. I rub my nose, scratch my beard, you know, pull my ears. Don't do any of that stuff. If you have to, make yourself sit with your hands in your lap. But, you know, don't take your glasses off. Don't fiddle. Don't rub your eyes. Don't pick your nose. Understand that they're watching you very carefully. And the point of the virtual interview is not so much what you're answering, but your countenance, your appearance on the actual video screen. Don't ever look away. If you've got notes, make sure you post them around the perimeter so it doesn't look like you're reading your notes. And so that's virtual interviews are basically to look at you and see how you would project how you would do in front of a group of people. It's not so much about the questions. They're generally easy questions. All right. Once you have progressed into the pool or past the first round, the second round of interviews is generally the group activity interview or the group interview. Now, the trick about this interview is that committee or that group is going to be stacked with civilians, lay people who are not educators. There'll be parents, community members, folks like that. And they're going to see how you can relate to them. You know, the people on the school, the parents from the school improvement team, the student that's on the, you know, the local hardware store owner who's on the school committee, those kind of people. They'll have maybe some teachers as well will be on this group interview committee. Usually there's somebody there from HR that's conducting the interview, but it's directed at lay people. The issue is they want to see if you can take and translate all the jargon that you've learned through your undergraduate program, your graduate program, this program, all the, you know, EVOS, MTSS, RTI, all the acronyms that we just go through all the time, but that lay people don't know. I was on an interview. I set up an interview for Principal of the Year in a school district last year. It was one of our collaborative partners. One of the principals came in and was using all this jargon, reading from his notes, using all this jargon, and then he would compound his error by saying, "Oh, you probably don't know what that means." And when he left, one of the parents that was there on the committee said, "How many times did he call me stupid? That I didn't know what he was talking about?" And I said, "I believe I counted 6 times." So needless to say, he did not advance in the process. And so I have a PowerPoint that's in your 605 shell. And basically what you're doing is they're going to ask you questions, educational questions, and it's going to be your job to translate them into language that parents and lay people can understand. Briefly decide what you perceive as your leadership style. See, if you ask me, I'd just say transformational. You know, participative leader. That would be what I would say. They wouldn't know the first thing about what a transformational leader is. So you'd have to tell them. Child-centered, focused on issues, avoid personal conflict, striving to be impartial, courteous, respectful, response to issues in a time, positive, approachable, open to change and new ideas, earns respect and trust in parents. Transformational leaders are not transactional. It's not about power. It's about shared governance, about being a servant leader. This would be the definition of a transformational leader, but they don't know what transformational leader means. You have to tell them. So, and don't catch yourself saying, oh, I'd be a transformation. Oh, you don't know what that means. No, this is the kind of leader that I am. And don't allude to the fact that they don't know what they don't know. You know it, but you don't have to highlight it for them. We often hear how assessment drives instruction. Instead of saying we'll do PLCs and do data walls and all that, you'll say things like, we'll do data analysis and we'll develop teacher strategies based on the needs of students, and we'll plan collaboratively. Now, you all know what that means. We're going to do data dives, we're going to do differentiated instruction, and we're going to do PLCs. But they don't know what any of those three things are, and so we're going to explain it to them. And so that's what the group interview is about. How do you relate to parents, community members, lay people? Can you translate all the jargon that you've learned throughout your career? Can you translate that to speak to an audience where they will understand it and not feel like you're talking down to them? That's very important. So that's what that second level interview of group with lay people in it. How do you relate to non-school professionals? How do you relate to the other stakeholders in our organization? All right. So that's the second level. All right. The third interview you will have when you get to that point, and in some districts that are smaller, you might start with this one, is the principal interview. Now, this is where you get to use your jargon because you're talking, professional to professional here. So let's find that one. All right. And so they're going to ask you about your goals, where you're going to be in 5 years, why you want to do this, they're going to ask you a lot of insider kind of questions. Support services, what would you do for students? That's why one of the things that I have you to do in 603 is do the HR interview. What employee relations or what services do you have? You got a teacher that's having troubles, what would you do? I mean, all those kinds of things. And you can use, you got kids that aren't learning. I'd go back and reassess those RTI lessons to make sure that they're being retaught with fidelity, things like that. Now, you're going to get a dialogue rolling with this principal, and it's going to be very, there'll be sympathetic vibrations going back and forth. You know the jargon, you know the language, you've been trained, and then they're going to slip in the trick question. They always do. They slip in the trick question, and this is where you just hang yourself. The trick question is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And they just that casually, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And boy, what a landmine question that is. That's when they get you. You thought things were going so well, and you just blunder right into something, and they you just blow yourself right out of the water. So here's how you always answer that question, always. And I'm going to stop the share so I can look at it. This is the way you answer the question. What are your strengths and weaknesses? You answer it this way and no other way ever. My strengths are dispositional. I'm a fully formed adult. They're never going to change. I'm honest. I'm ethical. I'm on time. I'm planned. I'm prepared. I'm compassionate. I'm interested. All the things that you are that aren't going to change. You can count on me. I'm ethical, I'm moral, I'm responsible. You don't have to tell me but one time. I'm a fast learner. All the things that you are that won't change with time one way or the other. I'm where I am that person that you can depend on. Because the most important thing the principal is trying to figure out is if they leave the building and put you in charge, will you be like Barney on the first season of Andy Griffith when Andy had to leave town and go to Raleigh and he put Barney in charge, and the first thing Barney did was give Gomer a gun and deputize the town drunk Otis. Will you do something that stupid? I mean, seriously, can I trust this person in my absence? If I'm going to principal's meeting, will I come back? Will I face a riot from either students or staff, or will this person not show up on time? I'm looking for somebody, a quality person. Will this person, have inappropriate relations with staff members? Those kinds of things. In one of the neighboring districts here to Gardner Webb's home campus, our main campus, the headline Saturday morning was another one of those that just makes your stomach turn, where an assistant principal was arrested overnight, was in jail on $1 million bond for inappropriate having sex with students. And the question that principal had to ask this morning is, how did you not know that? You hired this person. How did you not know that this person was a pedophile and a predator? That's a hard question to answer, isn't it? How did you not know that? So you've got to convince this principal that you're a quality person. So that's your strengths. Now, they're going to know what your weaknesses are, and you got to tell them. But your weaknesses are always based on inexperience, and that you know what they are, but you're going to fix them immediately. I haven't ever put interdisciplinary instance into Power School. I've seen Power School teacher portal, but I know the AP let me see his portal, and I know that it's a lot more involved, but I'm going to go get trained immediately. Everything that you list as a weakness, and only list 2 or 3, you can fix with experience. I know that I'm not certified to do teacher observations yet for the district and enter those into the portal, but I'm going to go get trained immediately so I won't be a burden on the others. Everybody understands that the administrative team divides up the number of teacher observations that they have. And if one of the people that is not certified, everybody else has got to pull your weight until you get certified. You understand that, and you know that, and you're going to go get that done. And that you haven't seen, the secret principal portal to EVOS, but you know that it exists, and you're going to get trained in that. So every one of your weaknesses, and don't have but 2 or 3, but every one of them can be fixed with experience. That yes, I have this weakness, but I'm going to make it a strength. I'm going to improve it. Don't say things like dispositional things like I'm not a morning person, or I really don't like working with adults, or, those kinds of crazy things that I've heard. Your strengths are always dispositional. You're a quality person, and your weaknesses are all based on inexperience that you can fix in a really short order. So make sure that you understand you're going to get that question when you go to that principal interview. And so that's the 3rd level interview. The 4th level interview after that one is going to be with the superintendent. Back in my day, early on, usually the superintendent didn't interview assistant principal candidates. They do now. Either the area superintendent or the superintendent in smaller districts, because they want to make sure that they get people into the pipeline that have the potentiality to be principals. We no longer have career assistant principals like we used to have. It's kind of either up or out now. And so many times the superintendent will interview assistant principal candidates, almost 100% now. And they're not going to talk about how to run a 3 lunch shift with a block schedule. They're going to talk about big picture ideas. Can you see the future? Do you know what's going to happen down the road? Can you be somebody down the road that I can look at to be a principal, and that you're already looking down that road yourself, that you see the big picture? And so they're going to ask you things like 21st century skills. And you're going to say, yes, I know all about those. And then they're going to ask you that trick question on those is, well, how you go about implementing those? We have a document in there that has a six-step process for how to implement 21st century skills. And then they're going to say, well, how would you know if it worked or not? What should they look like? We also have a document in there that tells you that if you teach students using 21st century skills and teach those skills, that this is what those students will look like. We call them future ready students. So these are the kinds of things that now it may be other big ticket items. And it may be one of the things that get asked is curricular is what do you think about Common Core? And, the appropriate question is, as a school-based administrator, I'd hope that we would spend our time focused on delivery, not the content itself, debating. My job as a school administrator is to carry out law and policy, and whatever the curriculum is, that's what we will do as a school. That we're about delivery and about teaching kids. Whatever the curricula is, we will teach it and we'll do it well. Those are the kinds of questions that you will get, the big idea questions when you interview with the superintendent. So those are the 4 levels. Now, I've got some things that are kind of general things to help you along the way with the interviewing process. Let's see, the 5 things that you should bring on your interview. A resume, a 2-page evidence summary will be helpful, where you summarize the 6 evidences that you did at Gardner-Webb for your portfolio. They don't want to see them, they don't want to read them, but they may ask you, what did you do? Or what about if they're older administrators that didn't come through this process, they'll want to know, what was them evidence artifacts things? And you could have a 2-page summary that you could share with them, and then do a 2-minute elevator speech off of that. Don't sit and read them, but tell them, we did 6 evidence artifacts. They replicate the school improvement planning process. We have one for instruction. We have one for staff development. We have one for master schedule. We have one for school and community parent involvement. We have one for culture and climate, teacher work condition survey, or advanced ed. And then the 6th one, we put them all together. Just that quick, and you can take a 2-page summary of the 6 evidences that you did, because you got to convince your interviewer that you can make a good number go up or a bad number go down. That's what they're looking for. Good numbers being instruction, being test scores, bad numbers, discipline, suspensions, acts of crime and violence. That you understand that this is a competitive environment, that your job is to make a good number go up and a bad number go down. And that you're not one of those people who believe, well, I'm not really that much interested in the report card or testing. I don't think that's an adequate representation of what a kid knows. They'll have you out there so fast that your head will spin. We're looking for people who understand how the game is played. If the state report card didn't matter, there wouldn't be one. You've got to know this is all about the numbers, making a good one go up or a bad one go down. This shows them that you know that if you give them a brief synopsis of this. Also, a portfolio, and that would be your competency folio that shows that you actually did some things during your clinical experience. You can share that with them electronically. Here's the one that Anara did. I use it as an example. I love this one. It's so quick and easy. She's got them labeled. That's what she did, and there they are. You can share that with a prospective employer. Share your folio to show that you actually did the work that you said you did during your clinical experience. Now, again, I've told you before, Anara actually highlighted which one of these were digital learning competencies. She turned this in as well as her transcript and got her digital teaching and learning credits for her license renewal with this as well. But this is one of those things when it says take a portfolio of your previous work. Well, you don't have any previous work other than your clinical experience, but this proves that you actually know what you're doing. This is proof of it. This is not just talk about it. Here's the products, the artifacts that I produce. So that's a good thing to take to the interview. So a resume, a summary, your references, your portfolio of work. Those are the kinds of things, but that 5 things that you should bring, these are those things when you go into an interview. Now, let me catch this question right quick. If you download your online folio, it'll be with you always. That's a good question from Amanda. Go ahead, and if you share it and make it in a link form, you'll always have it. But you just got to download and share it. And so that's it. I have 5 questions you should never ask in an interview. Be careful about when they ask you, well, do you have any questions? Because you kind of let your guard down sometimes on that one as well. So things to avoid. When will I be promoted, or how long are usually people have to be an assistant principal before they get promoted in this district? They're interested in that you want to do a good job at the job they're hiring you for, not the next job. What's the salary? Please remember, principals don't have a thing in the world to do with salary. If you're interested in what the salary is, you need to contact HR and do that before or after, but don't, that's not part of the interview process. When can I expect a raise? Don't talk to them about their bonus system or their EVOS bonus. Don't talk to them about, will I get my 12% for national boards? Again, during the interview process, you do not talk about money. So what sort of flex time options do you have? Oh my Lord. They expect you to be there from early to late. It's not a good sign when you're interviewing for a job. You already start talking about one time off. Or I have other things in my life that are more important than this. Can we work my job around my personal schedule? Or any question that shows you haven't been listening. I tell the story. I went to Hickory Grove to see Aquanetta. I stopped by and I saw a bulletin board out front of new employees, and there was a lady that I'd trained. And I was like, oh, she's working here now. So I went and asked Aquanetta, how's she doing? She said, I've already let her go. I said, it's not even cold weather yet. We've only been in school for 4 weeks. She said she didn't bother to tell me when she interviewed for the job that she had to leave 45 minutes before school was out every day to go pick up her kids. Not 45 minutes before she was allowed to leave, 45 minutes before the kids were let out. She had to leave every day. She informed me that she had to leave to go pick up her kids every day, and that was not negotiable. I said, that's fine. And she, so she gave her time. She go pick them up anytime she needed to. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. People don't want to hear that when they want to know that you're dedicated to them. They're trying to find the very best person that they can find. And you got to be honest with them about hours and your obligations and those things. That happened to be a late start elementary school that didn't get out until 4:45 every day. Faculty couldn't leave until 5. Administrators couldn't leave until 5:30 because of the buses. She wanted out at 4 o'clock every day, an hour and a half before she was legally allowed to leave. And she thought that she should be accommodated. No. And so you need to know those things before you go. Now this feeds into my top 10, and I'll expand on this when we get there. Let me catch another question. I have a top 10 for interviews. The 5 things, let's see. That's a good question. We'll go back to that one right now. Let's see. Home looking glass. Mail. Pedestrian. Post attendance. Yeah, it closed. That one closed itself. Let me pull it back up. I'm sorry. Let me close that one. Blackboard times itself out and closes. I had it pulled up. I'm sorry. This one should be in your shell. Let me pull up Dr. Stone's shell here. Under interviewing materials. 5 things to bring on your next interview. So here they are. Current resume, a cover letter, your references, strategic plan, and your portfolio. Strategic plan is your 2-page evidence summary that shows that you understand what that is. A cover letter that speaks to that job specifically and your interest in that job. So those are the things. The cover letter is kind of optional. Some districts require it, some don't. But basically what the cover letter says, I want this job for this reason, is what they're looking for. So that's the 5 things. Okay, so that's not the one I want. Let me see. I gotta find. Let me see. So I have a top 10 for interviewing, no matter what it is. Doesn't matter which of these 4 it is. Here are the things that you need to understand or you need to acknowledge about interviewing. All right, first one is dress for success. I don't care if they just tell you you're coming by and you're not meeting anybody important. That may not be true. Anytime you've got anything to do with an interview and you're going to be out and about, going to a school, whatever, I tell the story. I called a fellow for an AP interview one time, and he said, well, I'm working over here at the school today, and I'm not dressed appropriately. And I said, that's fine. But he came in and he had his bad wig on. He wore a wig, a hairpiece. And he came in with his bad wig on, and all I could think about was that bad wig. I sat there, it was kind of cocked to one side, kind of like the bill of his cap was over one eye, but it was his hair. I couldn't hire him. If wear your good wig. I don't care even if you're work day. I mean, don't come in dressed or something so obvious that it distracts from the actual interview. Even if they tell you it's informal, don't come in with your hair dyed some crazy color or with those crazy striped socks on and short pants or something. Don't come in something that draws obvious attention to yourself, because people question your motives. They think something's wrong with you. If you're a man, invest in a pair of black socks for your interview. I mean, I know that everybody loves these crazy socks now and stuff like that. Everybody doesn't get that. Don't come in dressed in a way that people question your judgment. I mean, not too many men my age come in and striped socks up to their knees with short pants on. You're probably not looking to hire somebody my age, but we wonder, even if you're 35 years old, we wonder about you if you come in with some questionable choices. It goes to your judgment and your maturity. So dress for success. Look like as your mother would have told you, or your grandmother, look like somebody when you come for an interview. Take your 2-page evidence summary. Be able to do a 2-minute elevator speech about it, not read it. Also, share with them your competency folio. Make sure that you have researched both the school administration and the school. You've looked at their report card. You've looked at their TWC online. You've got online and you clicked on the administration button on their school website and you've seen who they got. Know the backgrounds of the team. A lot of them, they'll have bios. Might be some link there that you can talk, but know what be prepared. My father always told me, son, you're rarely going to be the smartest fellow in the room, but you can always be the best prepared. Preparation is like anything else. Preparation leads to success. If you want the job, make sure you do your homework. Know what their scores look like. Know what the TWC looks like. All those things. Know who they got already and where you might be able to add to that team. Know what you don't know. EVOS, Power School, Power Source, RTI, PBIS, Finance. Be able to speak to the instruction in the bottom line, which is student achievement. When I say know what you don't know, you understand those things maybe from a teacher perspective. Know that they're a lot more involved from the administrative perspective. Know that you're going to need training in those things immediately. But know that goes back to strengths and weaknesses. Know that you've never entered a disciplinary incident into Power School, and it's quite involved. 3 screens takes a while to do it. But you have to do that in order to generate an official incident, and if you're doing a suspension, a legal suspension form. You can't just make one up on your own. Know that EVOS has a portal for the school, not just your teacher with a little dot and the colors. It has for the entire school. It has a lot more information as well in terms of who ought to be teaching what and where and when. Has implications, as I told you, in 603 for your master schedule. If you've never seen that portal, if your principal won't let you look, at least know that there is one. Understand RTI, that you've got to go out and you've got to monitor those scripted lessons. Biggest problem in RTI is that nobody checks to see if the lessons are delivered with fidelity. PBIS know that it is a paperwork nightmare if it's run correctly, or incorrectly, and know that there's a big administrative side to PBIS. It's not as simple as it might appear, and understand no finance. That's why I tell you to go and talk about the budget and see your bookkeeper and all that. There may be some things some questions that arise. Know the basic stuff, like there's 4 different funding sources: federal, state, local, and school. School fundraising is how you get your local money, that you can delegate the activity but not the responsibility. You're always responsible for it. Even if a parent group does it, you're held accountable for that. All money has to be turned in every day. We don't do competitive food sales. We don't want elementary kids going door to door. Know what the fundraising requirements or statutes are in that district. You may be asked those kinds of things. Be able to talk about instruction. That's the bottom line in schools is student achievement. We want them to be healthy, productive citizens, yes, but the bottom line, the reason why we're there is instruction. And we're all about instructional delivery. You don't want to get into a debate whether we should be using a standard course of study or whether we should be using Common Core. That's not for you at your level. Your job is to deliver it. Whatever it is, we're going to deliver it and deliver it well so that our kids can achieve. Have a humorous anecdote about how you were able to turn a negative into a positive. People appreciate that. Pretty much every written, almost 99% of the written references that I do on you folks, and I do at least one on all of you, some of you multiple ones when you apply for a job, the thing they want to know from me every time is, what did you do when you were faced with a significant challenge? When you had a negative or a challenge, and how you turned that around into a positive, or how you were able to be successful. It's usually best if you've got some kind of a humorous anecdote about that, how you were faced with a significant challenge and that you were able to overcome it. I always tell the story. I mean, it's just like, for me, the time that I had my best first grade teacher take a job with DPI and left me in the middle of the fall semester. And I had all these irate parents. But I turned it around, and I tell people it was just luck. It just dawned on me one day, and I asked the PE teacher if she wanted to teach first grade, and she did a great job. Turned a negative into a positive. And I tell the story as if it were luck. Hopefully I was a little smarter than that, but you don't tell that part. But something like that, where something happened that was unavoidable, but you were able to make a difference. Usually it's something good from your clinical internship, the time that you've been with us while you were an intern, some significant challenge that you faced in the administrative realm, and you were able to turn it around. And if there's a little humor in it as well, that's a good thing. All right. As I said earlier, be able and prepared to discuss hours and responsibilities honestly. Please remember, the school won't get any closer to your house just because you interviewed and got the job. The traffic won't get any better. Your responsibilities in terms of child care or elder care or what, those won't change just because you get the job. You need to be honest about those. You need to ask questions in a way. If it's a high school, you're going to have several nights a week where you're going to have to work the second shift. If it's an early start, if it's a late, you understand those things. If you have questions, ask those questions. But more than likely, they're going to tell you, and you need to be honest with them about those things. If they ask you, would you be able to, be here 3 nights a week, till 11 o'clock? I mean, you need to be honest with yourself and need to be honest with them. And that was the story about Aquanetta. She had to let a new AP go 4 weeks in because she had not been honest with her. And she had to know, it was her responsibility to know that it was a late start elementary school. That you couldn't, she had been working at an early start elementary her whole career, and everybody could leave at 4 o'clock. Then she had been a teacher. Administrators weren't allowed to leave until 4:30 at that building. But she thought, well, I've always gone home at 4 o'clock. I can go home at 4 o'clock here. No. And so you need to make sure that you know that. We've already talked about know your strengths and weaknesses because they're going to ask you. Your strengths are always dispositional. I'm honest. I'm responsible. I won't harm children. I'm a good person. I'm dedicated. I'm loyal. I'm on time. I'm hardworking. My weaknesses are I'm just inexperienced, and I'm going to work on that immediately. Don't talk about salary, experience steps, bonus pay, national board pay. Remember, none of these people that you're interviewing with have anything to do with that. Don't engage in gossip or negative talk because we know one another. We go to principals meeting 2 or 3 times a month. We know one another. Don't talk bad about anybody or anything. And then the last one is, and this is my pet peeve, don't interview for a job that you know that you're not going to take just to get the experience of interview. What you're saying to the interviewer is I wouldn't work in this bad place. I just came here to find out what the questions are so I can plan my answer so I can get the job at the school I really want to work at. The person that's interviewing you at that school, they're trying to find the best person for their team and for their students. You just coming to get experience in interviewing is just wasting their time. If you know that school is too far from your house or the hours don't work in your schedule or you don't want to work with that particular demographic, do not go and interview for that job. That's a fallacy, this notion of, interview as much as you can to get experience. Do not interview for a job you wouldn't take. If there's issues or there's some question, you got to work those out before you go and interview, before you apply. When you interview, you tell people I'm here and ready to work. Because if you go interview for a job and then they offer you the job and you say, well, I really don't want it, it's too far from my house. Well, you knew it was how far it was when you interviewed, and that word will get around, and people do not appreciate that in the business. It's just so far from my house. I can't. Well, it was the same distance when you drove for the interview as when you drive to work. You got to be honest with yourself, and that way, I mean, and as Aquanetta said, this wasn't just a time issue with the person that wanted to leave at 4 o'clock here. This is an honesty issue. This speaks to the kind of person this is, their dispositional behavior. I can't, if I couldn't trust her to tell me the truth on that, how could I trust her with anything? This wasn't about the leaving at 4 o'clock. This was about you omitted to tell me the truth. You were not honest with me. I can't have you on my team because we started out this whole thing on a lie. And so that's what I'm talking about. Don't start your relationship with a school or a school district. If you want that next interview, and you say, well, I'm going to get the questions, I'll interview. You may not get that next interview somewhere else. If you do something as dumb as tell somebody, no, I'm not interested because it's too far. It was too far when you interviewed. So make sure that you only interview for jobs that you will take. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to take them. There's a good one from Kim. I said on teacher interview this summer, the candidate said, well, I guess I'm better than no one. Don't say things like that. Don't be boastful, but tell them the kind of person you are when you go. Now, I won't spend time because my time is up. I have a top 10 for your first, when you get your job, and you will come back and revisit this one. The things that you need to do by the first faculty meeting to ensure that you get off on a solid footing. A lot of people ruin their career at a particular school before the first faculty meeting is ever held in the fall. How you start determines how you'll finish. The most critical time not to make missteps is in the first few weeks that you're on campus, like in the summer leading up to school. That's when you can make some really bad rookie mistakes. And so I've got my top 10 for by or during the first faculty meeting, you should have done these things or not done these things. Make sure you give that a look and a listen. Once you get your job, come back and revisit this. I'm going to go to questions now. We've got one that says, yeah, the group interviews where they just do a group interview and they place you at the school that they think that you should be at, that you best fit. That's why sometimes you get places that are too far from your house or whatever, but you need to understand that before you go, that you may be anywhere. My first principal job outside of the district where I moved districts, and I understood when I went and interviewed that I could be assigned anywhere in that district from one end to the other, that I would just have to move my family wherever it was. And if that was acceptable, if it wasn't, don't go interview. This is a great one. If it's one of those things where when you interview for that district, they put you somewhere, then you have to be willing for that to happen. You may have to relocate. And if you say, well, I'd take a job if it was over here, but not over there, then don't go. Because just as sure as you do, you'll get put over there rather than over here. And that will not go well for you. You only get your first chance one time. And if you do not do well your first time out, you will not get a second time out. If you're 3 or 4 jobs down the road and you have one that's not too good, you'll get another chance. But if the first one goes bad, there'll be no more chances. You need to understand you get a 2-year contract as an AP. At 1.5 years, they make a decision on you. If you don't make it, you're just out. Now, if you teach in an area that's a high need area, but understand when you leave the classroom, there is no law or rule or tenure that gives you that job back. You're taking a risk now. You're moving up. You need to be as successful as you can. And if you can't live with the notion, well, they might put me 2 hours away at the other end of the county, then don't go to the interview. You've got to decide that up front. You're not always going to get to work at the school next to your house. It doesn't work that way. That's part of modern school administration. Yeah, a lot of times districts that are more affluent, they want you to go somewhere else and get trained and knock all the rough edges off of you, and then they'll bring you back into that district. That happens a lot now. Places that have their pick of APs won't experience people. They don't want to have to work you through the kinks, and they want you to have been successful somewhere else. They don't want to take the time and the risk of wasting time on you and you don't pan out. So yeah, a lot of the bigger districts are the districts that a lot of people want to work in. They won't take a brand new AP. They want you to go somewhere else, a smaller, rougher, tougher district. Make sure you can cut it, and then they'll hire you. That's part of it, but you have to understand that. You have to understand you may have to go to some place you don't want to be for a while, and you smile and act like you're the most happy person in the world to get to be there. If you don't, you won't make it. Not every district does that, but a lot of the larger ones do, or the more affluent districts where there's a lot of competition for jobs. It's just like, why would I hire a beginning teacher if I can get an experienced one that I know can do the job? That's kind of the notion there. For me, I like to get brand new people so I can train them the way I want to. That's just me. But some principals, I don't want to have to get a brand new one and break them in. I have to spend too much time with them. We'll hire better ones and you won't have to. If you hire good ones, you won't have to spend all your time training. And see, that's what you're trying to do throughout this process is you're trying to convince somebody to hire you and that you won't be a liability. You won't be a burden. They won't have to spend all their time walking around putting their finger on everything that they want you to do. That you're a self-starter, that you're planned, prepared, you're good to go. That you don't have to have a warder or somebody to mind or watch you all the time. You know, you're not going to be like Barney. We have to make you carry your bullet so you won't shoot somebody by accident. Can't let you have a loaded gun. We want you to know, or you've got to portray to the person that I may be inexperienced, but I know what I'm doing, and you won't regret hiring me, and you won't have to spend every day telling me what to do and what not to do. That I'll come in and get after it. And still you may not get the job. They still may want you to go somewhere else. When you go there, you do the same thing there. And then you get the opportunity to move up. I mean, I did that in my career. I had to go through a number of small districts and seats. My ultimate goal was to go to Charlotte. They didn't hire inexperienced people in Charlotte. It just didn't happen. You didn't get a principalship in Charlotte, coming from an AP or coming from, you couldn't work your way up. You had to be a successful principal somewhere else. And in my era, the reason why you wanted to go to Charlotte was for the challenge, but also for the pay and the opportunity. It was much greater there. They did contracts. The day I walked into Charlotte Mecklenburg, I doubled my salary because they negotiated contracts. I was willing to give up tenure. That's back before everybody. Now you don't have it once you anymore. But back in those days, principals had tenure, and Charlotte Mecklenburg would pay you to become a contract principal, and you gave up your tenure. But they didn't hire inexperienced principals. They wanted people who had experience, but they were willing to pay for it. And as I said again, the day I walked into the school in Charlotte Mecklenburg, I doubled my previous salary. But I had no safety net either. But I was willing, I was betting on myself because I had been successful. I was not a kid. I had been in business 17 years when I went. And did the last 15 there. And was well compensated. But that was the plan. It took 17 years to get there, working in places that you couldn't even find on a map. GPS would just be spinning if you were looking for them. But, I eventually made the big time. So these are lessons that I've learned, that Dr. Stedman's learned, Dr. Talent, Dr. Stone. These are lessons that they've learned. Dr. Stone worked his way up through, the superintendency to, from one of the smaller districts in the state to a nice medium-sized district. And I won't say that it was a better place to work or live, but, success breeds success. You move up. But you've got to be willing to go to these places and do the things. If you're not, don't put yourself in a situation for failure because you won't get but one chance. You won't get but one chance. At this time, I know I've run a little bit over here. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues now for anything that they would like to share. We've got Dr. Stone with us tonight. We've got Dr. Sanders. Got Dr. Stedman. Dr. Stone, I'll start with you if there's something that you'd like to add to this evening.
Well, no, I think you've given some really good practical advice, and there's nothing more important than that first impression when you walk into that building. And that also in a small district or even a medium-sized district, that first impression is going to also carry over when principals have those conversations in their building. So make a great impression, follow the advice, come back to this shale. We want you to be successful, and we're going to do whatever we can. But you've gotten some really super great advice I wished I had when I applied for my first assistant principalship. But great job, Dr. Lamb.
Thank you, Dr. Stone. Dr. Sanders, I talked with her earlier today. She's trying to save her voice. She's a little hoarse, so thank her for being with us tonight. And she said she'd be here, and she's pulling for you as well. Dr. Stedman, you get to do the benediction tonight. Close us out. Take us home.
Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this great group of students. I've had every one of them, and I've scanned to see who was here, and I have confidence in every one of these students. I know that they're going to make great administrators, and I just look forward to following their career paths and, to being a part of the great things that are coming. Again, I watched their countenance while you were presenting, and they really were taking in what you were saying. I saw a lot of them writing down things while you were talking. So every one of them have been great students. So I have no doubt that they're going to take this great advice and they're going to move forward with it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stedman. To end up tonight, to continue that theme of great students, thank you, Emily. It's good to see you. Last thing I have to share with you tonight, and we'll leave you on this thought. Our ranking came out this year. The 15 colleges in North Carolina that offer principal preparation programs. They are ranked each year by universities.com. You'll be glad to know that you are in the #1 program in the state of North Carolina, and for the first time ever, we beat Chapel Hill. And so this is about you and your data. It's not about us. This is about you, about how well you're doing in your jobs. Once you get your jobs, that performance data feeds back into a database at DPI. It's your surveys, your preparation, your planning. All those things are what it's the students who have made us the #1 program in the state, and we thank you for that. And so we expect that to continue. We know that you'll all do well. We don't have any problem recommending you for jobs. And so please be sure to contact us. If you need reference letters, contact me. I will get those to you. Same day service. If you want those, so go ahead and start sending me notice that you would like a letter for your packet, those reference letters. It's good to have one of those as you go. I fill out the electronic ones. I do 1 or 2 every day. We'll be glad to do those as well. But again, thank you for choosing Gardner Webb. Thank you for being great students. Thank you for making us #1 this year. We'll try to repeat again next year. Heavy lies the head that wears the crown. So it'll be tough, but we'll try to repeat again next year. And we thank you, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Dr. Lamb,
Soon.
there's a link to this information that you just showed us, is there not?
There is.
And you know what? I was just thinking, if you could send that with their video, that is something that they need to keep, and they can use it along with their folios when they're preparing for interviews. That would be great information to show that this is where you graduated from.
It is. I'm going to send this out tonight. I've got the link copied when I send you the video, and we'll have it posted in your shelves as well. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
Not everybody.
All right. Felicia says she has her praxis on Saturday. Any suggestions? Just go to the website that we have in your shell and take the praxis test. That's all you really need to do. Is take the practice test. Everybody have a good evening.
Thank you.